people are 0 to 100 oftentimes. They're like, okay, I got to overhaul my whole diet. I got to get into a stringent workout routine. I got to drink all the water. I got to sleep the X amount of hours when they weren't doing any of that before.
Yeah.
So I would choose 1 to 2 things that are going to make a great impact. Because the other thing that a lot of people do is they make a change that seems easy, but doesn't give them great impact. So then they're not motivated to stick with it. So try to find 1 to 2 changes that might be a little more difficult, but they're going to give you a great impact. Because once you start to see those results, once you start to feel that difference and you progress, that is going to be your motivation to continue to do that.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Unfulfilled. I'm your host, Camille. Today, I am joined with a fantastic guest. Her name is Lauren Zambito. Lauren is a holistic wellness coach who also specializes in nutrition and hormone health. Today, we're going to dive into everything wellness. So, we're going to talk about her nutrition, non negotiables, lessons, the importance of eating non processed foods, and how all of these nutrition and wellness related hacks not only impact our physical health, but our mental health and gut health. Then we're going to take the conversation into how to shift our mindset to accept that there's no such thing as perfect wellness. No matter how hard we try to eat the perfect diet, to exercise every single day, there's always going to be new things that we're learning and exceptions we have to make along the way to just find a balance with it all. So Lauren is going to guide us through this conversation today. Before we dive in, if you are not already, please press follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. It'll not only give you access to episodes every single Monday when they come out, but also be really integral in supporting the unfulfilled community. Thank you so much for being here today. And Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, to start out, why is it so important to prioritize eating whole, non-processed foods?
I could go on about this for a long time, but I've always tried to focus on eating as little processed food as possible. In our day and age, there's a lot of, we're short on time, we're busy, it's convenient. So I totally get that. But I've done personal experimentation with myself on the difference of even eating processed foods that have quote unquote good ingredients or minimal ingredients and even removing those. And I experienced a huge difference. And there's a few reasons why. If you think about a processed food, healthy or unhealthy, essentially it's a large volume of ingredients that are getting refined to a point of boiling it down to a powder, a cracker, a bar, something really small. In that really small item, it started off as a large volume of food that went through that great refining process. So that's one reason why it can cause bloat, inflammation, digestive issues for people. And then on top of that, these processed foods usually have a lot of ingredients, unnatural ingredients, typically dyes, seed oils that are heavily refined, or chemical corrected things, preservatives. And then, of course, refined sugars or large amounts of sugars, depending on what type of processed food that we're talking about, and little nutritional value. So usually you'll eat something like chips. If you were hungry, it probably didn't fill you up. It doesn't do much for you. And then if you think of even like a healthy process, such as a protein bar or a protein powder, it's the same concept. And I'm not saying you should never eat those. I think they're great options to have like for convenience and in a pinch. But it's back to that whole thing of just thinking, how does this one scoop have 20 grams of protein? You look at the ingredients, it has a million different things in it. It's most likely going to be a little irritating to your gut, difficult to digest, really hard to assimilate those nutrients. So I would shift to the majority of your diet coming from foods that when you look at them, you see what the food is. You look at a protein bar, you don't really know what it is. You look at an egg, it's an egg. That's always going to be more bioavailable, easier to digest, which is going to lead to less inflammation. And what I experienced was getting rid of that like last little bit of bloat, that last little bit of puffiness that you see in your face, a little bit of a extra like zing in my energy, mental clarity. I felt a difference and I considered myself to be someone that wasn't eating a lot of processed food to begin with. So I think it just shows to someone who's maybe relying on it a lot more, what a massive difference it could make for them if they just shifted a little bit, the other direction.
Thank you for sharing that. That's super interesting. And it seems like it's getting harder and harder to do that nowadays. It seems like everything's just becoming more and more processed. And in our society, it's all about convenience. It's all about what's easy. The less preparation, the better, the less effort, the better. And that often equates to more processed food. And so it is really hard. It is going to take a little bit of extra effort to go to the grocery store, be thoughtful and cognizant about the foods that you're buying, about the foods that you're cooking to put into your body. But I think the important thing to remember is it's really, really important and integral to your health in taking that extra effort and going through those extra steps. I had a very similar experience where I used to eat a lot more processed, similar to you. I wouldn't say very processed, but I have noticed in shifting to a lot more of a whole foods based diet, my gut health has been a lot better. And I think it's because I'm no longer subjecting my body to those sneaky chemicals and ingredients that they put into these things.
Yeah. And I think that every little bit counts. So let's say you're like, well, I only have this one thing today or this one thing. If it's a little bit here and there, it really does add up because it's called toxic load. So even if you're just having you feel like you're having a little bit here and there, it's those things are so hard to process out of our bodies that they do add up over time. So even just one swap, one removal of one thing is going to help you in the other direction as well.
And you mentioned protein bars. I feel like that's a really big thing nowadays.
Yeah.
Like in my office, for example, there's like 25 different kinds of protein bars, but every single one of them has ingredients that we probably shouldn't be putting into our body or ingredients that are going to set off our gut health. They're all a slightly different variation of the exact same thing. And as you mentioned, they're just 20 grams of protein packed into these things. But you said sometimes they're okay.
Yeah.
How do you find that balance of, okay, these probably are things that we should stay away from if they're processed, but at the same time, good to keep around for like if we're in a pinch, in a bind? How do you find that balance?
Yeah, great to keep around for sure if you're in a pinch or a bind, but find the best possible option you can. So try to find one with more minimal ingredients. Try to find one with more whole food ingredients and less processed stuff. If it says pea protein isolate, whatever other protein isolate, tapioca starch, some kind of weird fiber, and you're like, what is this? If it's got all those different things in there, plus it's got added sugar, probably avoid that one. So more simple ingredients if you're going to go for it and just not making it your primary thing that you rely on and also paying attention to frequency. So I had a client that I was coaching and she was having 1 to 2 every single day. So it was a major thing she was relying on. And what it took was realizing that frying up like 2 eggs in the morning was really adding like 5 to 10 minutes to her morning. It was a much more whole food form of protein, bioavailable. You're getting all sorts of other nutrient density from that egg. That's way better than the protein bar. The second thing was prepping snacks to take that she could take with her. So she just took one prep session in the beginning of the week to have snacks that were ready to go. So it takes shifting for people. It takes a little bit of accountability, sometimes a little bit of planning, sometimes a little bit of a change in your routine, but try to rely more on that than the convenience aspect. And these other things turn out to be just as convenient for you oftentimes once you get used to that kind of pattern.
I love that you brought that up, that it was 5 to 10 minutes of her day that she had to make this adjustment. But the result and benefit that she saw was worth a lot more. It probably would have been worth 30 minutes to an hour making a change every day because I find at least when my gut's thrown off and when my physical health doesn't feel good, it impacts my entire day. So taking that 5 to 10 extra minutes to cook a whole foods based natural protein breakfast is so worth it. And I love that you also said making it a habit and ingraining it into your routine. I think that's key when it comes to nutrition and diet. And I would love your take on this as well. The importance of doing it every day and incorporating it into our routine and making it a habit, because otherwise it's going to be that much easier to just fall back on the processed foods. Because if we're not used to cooking eggs every morning, or if we're not used to going to the grocery store and cooking dinner, it's going to feel that much harder. It's going to feel unnatural and uncomfortable, especially if we had like a long work day, if we haven't meal prepped at all to really incorporate this into our life and be intentional about it. It is going to be a lot harder. Speak to how people can better incorporate this into their routine and make these daily healthy habits.
So people are 0 to 100 oftentimes. They're like, "Okay, I gotta overhaul my whole diet. I gotta get into a stringent workout routine. I gotta drink all the water. I gotta sleep the X amount of hours," when they weren't doing any of that before.
Yeah.
So I would choose 1 to 2 things that are going to make a great impact. Because the other thing that a lot of people do is they make a change that seems easy, but doesn't give them great impact. So then they're not motivated to stick with it. So try to find 1 to 2 changes that might be a little more difficult, but they're going to give you a great impact. Because once you start to see those results, once you start to feel that difference and you progress, that is going to be your motivation to continue to do that. It is a reward system. So you will be motivated to keep doing it. If you make a change for something so minuscule that you don't notice any difference, you're not going to stick with it. And then what is that going to teach yourself? Oh, making these types of health changes, they don't do anything. You want to teach yourself the opposite thing. Making these small changes does make a great impact. One example would be if you're noticing a large pattern of one particular processed food, rather than just removing it, try to find a swap for it. So, like with this client, instead of having the protein bar for breakfast, we swapped it with eggs. Make 1 or 2 changes at a time. And then simplifying your diet, really. There's so much information out there. There's so many trends. People get pulled in this direction, that direction. They want to try some viral wellness products, some quick fix when they're not even doing the foundational things of just making sure that they're getting enough protein, fats, and fiber throughout the day. So strip it back,
Yeah.
simplify.
Wow, I have a lot of different directions I wanna take this in. I wanna start off by touching on what you just said, coming back to the simple things. I personally have gotten very caught up in buying into all the wellness products you can buy, the electrolytes, the green powders, all the vitamins, and all those things, and I found I was spending a ton of money on, like, a lot of the same things, but also a lot of these things that we are supposed to just be getting from our diet and just living a healthy lifestyle. Not to say supplements aren't a positive thing. I think some supplements are really great, but I think it's really, really important for listeners to think about what you just said in the sense that the most important thing is the foundation of your diet. And are you incorporating these healthy things into your everyday diet in a simple way? And again, it comes back to eggs, whole foods. And another thing that came to mind in how we can make healthy habits stick, prepare things you like. Make foods that you enjoy eating that you would look forward to. Because if you're making yourself eat these salads every day, let's say that you really don't even like, but you saw it on TikTok, as you mentioned, and you're like, oh, that's how I'm gonna get that body or be as healthy as she is. I'm just gonna make her exact diet.
Mm.
You wanna tailor it to something you like. Otherwise, you're not gonna be motivated or excited to keep at it. Would you agree?
Totally agree. And you said something very important, which is seeing something somebody's doing and trying to emulate it because you
Mhm.
like how they look, or you feel like they had a similar issue as you, and this is what helps them. We are all so individual. And I don't think seeing what someone else is doing and just copying them is going to get you anywhere. And I'm sure a lot of people listening have tried that and it didn't get them anywhere. I also really feel for these people because I was that person at once. And I understand where it comes from. You are desperate for answers. You are confused. You maybe went to a healthcare provider that didn't really help you, but almost always the answer is back to that foundation. People are seeking that product or that formula to copy because they want it to be simple. They're maybe hopeless from not getting results, trying other things. They've tried a million things. They don't know what's going to work. So they're just trying to find an answer. But I would ask people to just take a step back, tune into their own body, and just try to drown out the noise and go back through the basics. I have a free roadmap on my website that people can download. It's totally free, but it's touching on all the different areas of health. And you can just work your way through those pillars and start with the starting point on each one. So, like I said, if diet is your biggest downfall, start there. Don't worry about the other things. If you know you're not sleeping enough, start there. If you're not drinking enough water, like most people know what they're not doing and what they should be doing.
Mhm.
They would just prefer to take that supplement to try to fix it instead.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You again, said a couple things that I really want to touch on. It goes beyond diet. It's sleep, it's exercise, it's overall holistic wellness. So, yes, super crucial to prioritize eating those whole non processed foods, as we discussed in the beginning. But I'm really glad you just noted that it is really important to take it steps further to ask, okay, are you getting sleep? Is that what you need to be prioritizing over your diet right now? So maybe don't stress about the protein bars. Maybe just focus on getting that 8 hours and then take the next step to shift to the eggs or whatever it is that you want to swap. But one thing at a time, especially with all these New Year's resolutions, it's easy to pile on too much too quickly, but then it gets lost in the sauce and then you don't really end up sticking with any of it because it just feels overwhelming and you're just like, screw it, whatever. So love that point in that we have to look at it with a holistic view and not just scrutinize our diet. You also shared that you used to be someone who was very stressed about diet and who was uncertain as to why you were experiencing these gut problems and low energy and all of those symptoms you were feeling. I want to talk about this not only because I 100% have been there myself and still overcome these thoughts and confusion at times when it comes to diet and wellness, unsure what's causing certain things. But I would love for you to speak about some of the most important lessons that you've learned along this journey and what you wish you could tell your younger self when it comes to overall wellness and nutrition.
There's a lot of things that I would like to tell my younger self. And oh, goodness. So I think a lot of women who were born in the 90s or even the early 2000s, whenever we were preteen and teenager at that really vulnerable age where we start to become aware of our bodies and possibly self-conscious of them or just not confident, we had mothers who were in the peak of diet culture. That's just how it aligned. Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, Lean Cuisine, Fiber One, like all of those super processed foods, but they had, oh, 290 calories. Like, okay, this is easy to track. It's right there on the label. Oh my goodness. I was trying to like emulate what I was seeing celebrities doing, Victoria's Secret models, and then watching my mom go on and off of diets. And in my mind, being thin or eating as little as possible was the definition of being healthy, which I am so, so happy that I think young women right now in this generation, thank goodness, I don't think they think that way. Generally speaking, there's a much larger focus on true health, fueling your body rather than restricting. So to my younger self, I would say fuel over restrict. Nourish is a great word I always would come back to. Nourish your body and love your body. Like, don't tell yourself negative things. There's a book called Your Body Keeps the Score, and it's really more about trauma, but it's also about the things we tell ourselves, our mental health. I would look at myself and say, I look disgusting. How horrible. Like, would you say that to your sister, your best friend, your daughter? No. So why would you say it to yourself? And I think that those little messages to your body are so, so important. So some of the shifts that I would tell myself, like, let's say I didn't love how I looked. That's okay. If you don't like how you look right now and you want to get better, that's awesome. But instead of looking in the mirror and analyzing yourself and picking your body apart, instead tell yourself, I'm going to take the actions forward to be better, or I'm currently doing everything in my power to get to the body that I want. Like, shift it to something more constructive and positive. And then another thing that hear people doing and that I used to do, let's say it's not even aesthetic related, like maybe you have dietary restrictions due to allergy, a sensitivity. I think even the verbiage around that, like, oh, I can't have gluten, I can't have dairy, I can't have this. Instead, even if it is a true can't because you're allergic, I would say I choose not to have that because I know I'm not going to be my best. You're not giving food the power, you're taking the power. I think a lot of people allow their thoughts around food to become obsessive and to control them. I know people that struggle to either lose weight or gain weight or whatever their goals are. It ends up consuming so much of their thoughts and so much of their energy.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's so true. I think every single person struggles with restrictive thoughts, some more than others, when it comes to food. I definitely have been there myself. And it's so easy to do when in our society, it seems like there's just constant information being thrown at us. And a lot of that information, unfortunately, these days is telling us, oh, this is bad for you now. Like, cut that out of your diet, cut this out of your diet. It's all about restriction. And then on top of that, we're constantly comparing to what other people are doing. So we see other people cutting things out of their diet because maybe they don't like it, or maybe they just choose not to eat it. It's easy to internalize that and think, oh, maybe I should try that, or maybe I should cut that out. And so it is really easy to feel like we're just constantly restricting. But I think a big key to having a healthy lifestyle is diversity and incorporating a lot of different things. And if you're restricting because of digestion, I think incorporating diversity is one of the best ways to improve digestion and our overall health. So thank you for sharing that idea around restriction. I think that's a really, really key thing to shift our mindset around overall health and wellness.
Yeah. And if people are removing things, whether they need to or whether they're experimenting with it, I always would suggest adding as well
Mm,
instead of just removing. So, like when I work with clients, for example, I don't say, stop eating this, stop eating that, take this out. I actually only focus on what we're adding to the diet and try to naturally let those things get crowded out. There's less room for the processed food. There's less room for the refined sugars and sweet if they're focusing on home cooked meals with whole foods. If you're removing dairy, let's say, because you think you need to or you need to, have coconut yogurt instead or have cashew milk instead. Of course, being aware of ingredients, but rather than just removing, I think it's always helpful to try to find a swap. And then just one other comment on something that you said I wanted to touch on is if you're seeing someone else doing something, always keep in mind, where am I on my journey? Because maybe that person has a 10-year history of a really strong foundation already with nutrition and exercise and whatever. So now this particular person can focus on these supplements. Where am I on my journey? I don't know if I'm there yet. I'm going to take 17 steps back. So I think that's just a good check for people to consider where they are on their own health journey.
100%. I definitely used to compare a lot more to what other people were doing, how they were living their life. Not even just with food. I would look at how much other people were exercising, especially when we're younger and gaining confidence as young females. Comparison is just a really difficult battle, especially when it comes to our health and wellness and how we look and the confidence we have in ourselves. And so the first thing we want to do is look at what other people are doing and then hold that up to our own and say, I should just emulate theirs more. But as I've gained more confidence in myself, as I've practiced self love and learned what works more with my body just through trial and error, I've felt the need to compare less to what other people are eating, their exercise routine, because I've gone through the steps and motions of learning, like, oh, I feel good when I do this. I don't feel as good when I do that. And what other people choose to do has nothing to do with what's going to feel good in our individual bodies. Everyone's on their own journey, and it's kind of trial and error. Like, okay, maybe that food doesn't sit well with me, or maybe I don't even like that food. Just because other people are adding or restricting certain things into their diet or exercising a certain way, that has nothing to do with what you should be doing or need to be doing.
Totally agree.
So let's shift to this idea that there's no such thing as a perfect diet and perfect wellness, especially nowadays with all the information at our fingertips and constant statistics being thrown around, new findings about food, the trendy new exercise, whatever. How can we shift our mindset to give ourselves grace and understand that it's okay that our diet and nutrition and wellness isn't perfect? And how can we just do the best we can with the information that we have?
Perfect is not possible, and you're setting yourself up for failure. You find yourself going 0 to 100, 0 to 100, 0 to 100, sometimes just back and forth between those two. I'm doing nothing or I'm doing everything because I'm striving for perfection. It's so much more effective to think about, people say 80-20 a lot. I'll even say 80 to 90, being the 20 or 10% is things that come up, situations, celebrations, because food and health is so, so, so important, but so is connection with others and
Mhm.
a healthy mental state. So if it's your birthday and you want to have cake, or it's your friend's birthday and you want to have cake, you should have that without having one single second thought about it because 80 to 90% of the time, you're doing everything amazing for your health. So, consistency, of course, is the key to experiencing any type of result at all. And you just don't get that consistency when you're striving for perfection. And it took me a lot of years to realize that, but I just kept reminding myself of that 80-20 or that 90-10. And eventually you prove it to yourself because you realize, oh, it's been a whole year and I've been able to sustain this lifestyle. Whereas the perfection is totally unsustainable. And you're just going to keep finding yourself right where you started.
I couldn't agree more. And you're constantly looking at what you're doing wrong rather than all the wonderful things that you're doing for your body and in your everyday life and all the improvements that you're making. And I also find when I get too caught up in that perfectionist mindset, especially when it comes to health and nutrition, it's just stressful, right? Like, hey, if I have a social plan and I'm going out to dinner, I don't need to scrutinize the menu and pick out what I'm going to eat beforehand and make sure they have a healthy option. The connection is what I'm going for, and connection is so important for our overall wellness and well-being as well. If we're adding this stress on top of it to try to be perfect, we're literally worse off than if we just ate the cake, like you said, or ordered whatever we want on the menu. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Striving for that perfection is actually making us worse off and our biggest downfall. Whereas what if we just try to strike a balance and listen to our bodies? But it's hard to do, when we're constantly being fed all of this information that maybe we were doing things wrong, but then we pivot and look forward. We can't go back and change. We can just do the best we can with the information we have.
Yes, and it is hard to do because I remember feeling fear of like, oh, if I start to let go a little bit of
Mhm.
forgiveness, if I start to relax a little bit, am I gonna start heading in the other direction? And so it was a mental battle, especially if you've been doing things one way, if you've let it consume your thoughts for so long, you're literally rewiring your brain. But if you're stressed and obsessed about food, you are hijacking so many neurological systems in your body. You're increasing cortisol, which we know is actually going to affect your appetite. It's going to affect even your insulin levels, which is how your body is processing blood sugars and storing energy or storing fat. Like it actually impacts things on a physiological level, not to make it add more stress for people, but
Mhm.
just to know that the stress around food really is more detrimental than even from a mental standpoint. It's having a physiological effect on you.
100%. And as you pointed out earlier, it's all about consistency. And I like to remind myself too, our bodies as human beings are meant to digest and handle that 10 or 20% that's imperfect. Like we will be okay because we're putting so much positive effort and healthy things into our diet most of the time. And most of the time getting that good night's sleep and most days getting good exercise. That 10 or 20% isn't going to have an impact, especially a lasting impact. It will pass and you might as well enjoy it and just try to move on the best you can because the more you dwell on it, I think the worse the impact it's going to have.
Yeah. And that's that 10 or 20% is life. It's family. It's your best memories. It's so important. So just thinking of it like that I think is reassuring and helpful and motivating, positive.
And I think it goes to show also that a lot of our wellness does come back to mindset. It's what's the narrative we're telling ourselves? How are we talking to ourselves? And what importance are we giving to the actual important versus unimportant things? Lauren, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights today. I loved this conversation. I know so many others did as well. Where can everyone find you?
Bare Nutrition Health on everything. Instagram and TikTok is really where you can find me, but that's also my website, which of course are linked in my bio of my social media at Bare Nutrition Health for everything. BARE.
Awesome. I'll link that in the show notes as well, everyone. Thanks so much again, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Unfulfilled. Really excited about this topic. Would love to hear your thoughts. Please send this to someone in your life who you think might need to hear this message. And again, press follow or subscribe wherever you are listening would mean the world to me. Thank you again for showing up today for yourself. And I'll see you all again soon on your journey to becoming more fulfilled.